Today, a fireside chat with Dig Drive DIY. There are two types of people in this world, those that burn firewood and those that don't. But fortunately, this video is for both of you, because if you currently burn wood or grew up with it, then you might find it interesting to see the 6 different wood burners I'm about to share with you. And if you didn't, well then maybe you'll learn something about someone like me, because I'm going to explain the top 4 reasons for why I go to the trouble of heating with wood. They're saying this could be the coldest Christmas in the last 40 years, and I believe them, since I currently have 3 different fires going here just at our place. So I think it's the perfect time to talk about this stuff. Hopefully you got a nice warm spot to sit and join me, unlike this spot, because this was a stupid idea. It is freezing. I'm gonna head back inside.
Dig Drive DIY.
Even if you don't burn firewood, I can promise you that your ancestors did. Wood, as a fuel source for heating, is much older than civilization, and it's assumed to have been used by the Neanderthals.
Fire can be used for cooking, as a heat source, and to scare away those unwanted wild animals.
For the natives, or the first colonists in North America, it would have been nearly the only way to heat your home. Still might be for some. So, for so many folks that still live out in the country, heating with firewood is a multi-generational family tradition. Both my wife and myself grew up in early 20th century farmstead homes where the primary heat source was firewood. This is where I grew up. We burned wood in the house in 2 different stoves right there, that little red door underneath the window. That's where we would back the trailer of wood up to, and we'd hand it all down into the basement. Enter the basement. Wood came in right here. There's the stack of wood, and right there is a hole. There's a grate where there used to be a giant furnace down here, and that would be an air vent. Well, before this air duct was here, we would open up that hole in the floor and hand the wood from down here up above. So we'd take the logs out of the floor. The hole is about right here somewhere, and then carry them over to the stove. A lot of times we'd fill up a cart and push a cart over here to the stove. The stove was right here. We had a great big wood box right here, and we would fill up the wood box full of wood. So this is an earth stove, very popular. There's a screen that goes on the front. You know, this is all we use to heat the entire downstairs. Well, that's not true. When it got super cold, we started the other stove. So this is actually the oldest stove that I'm going to show you today. And this is the little stove that's in what we used to call the little living room right off the kitchen at Mom and Dad's house. And when it got super cold outside and that stove wouldn't do it, we'd have to light this one. We didn't burn this one all the time, did we?
We did.
Or most of the time?
Yeah.
Most of the time. All had to tend to the stove. We put wood in the stove since I was how old?
Probably 8.
You're 8? This stove is really interesting because what's this history on this little potbelly stove?
Well, this stove came from my parents' house where I was raised. It sat in the kitchen. This was one of the main heat sources that we had. We had this one in the kitchen, and then we had an oil stove in the living room. And those was the only 2 sources of heat. Had no heat upstairs in the bedrooms.
Nothing upstairs at all?
No, no heat at all. We had one register that was about 10 inches square that went up through the floor, and that was the only way to get heat upstairs.
So why did they take this out? Why Grandma and Grandpa took this out and you moved it down here when you started to remodel this house?
When we remodeled the house.
You remodeled here in 1979. Moved
yes,
in and
moved in 79. It was rusty. Had to clean it all up and stuff, but it's a really basic stove, and boy, when you get a fire in it, it gets hot. It was so hot that this is nothing more than a tin drum on the side of it.
Oh, there's nothing to it. There's no fire brick in there.
No,
nothing.
none.
Wow.
And so there was several nights that I came down here and sat in a chair and watched it because this thing was cherry red. I don't know what I would have done except for holler fire, but...
Well, I understand how that would keep you up at night, though.
I mounted a little fan and thermostat up there to help blow heat out in the kitchen.
And you knew when the stove was getting hot when that fan would kick on. Zzz. I haven't heard that thing run in years.
No.
You could cook on here, too, probably.
Yeah. You could put a coffee pot or whatever on there.
That's pretty cool. Well, are you glad that you burned wood all those years, or didn't have a choice, or would you have done it differently?
Back then we had electric baseboard heat, and that would work, but it just wouldn't get the whole house warm. I mean, you
Right.
had to be sitting close to a heater to feel the heat.
Yeah, the wood, there's nothing that just heats up a space like radiant heat from a wood stove. So
It was a lot of work, but I like to think that it saved us a lot of money if you don't consider your time cutting the wood.
well, that's what a lot of people always say, you got to count your time. Well, not really. If that time would have just been idle anyway, then.
Yeah.
And that thought rings true for most of us when we're young. When Karen and I bought our house as newlyweds, we didn't have any extra money. Our newly acquired old farmhouse had 2 heat sources, electric baseboard heaters and a wood-burning stove at the center of the house in the kitchen. When you're poor like we were, firewood is an easy choice because if you've got a chainsaw and a way to move it, you can heat your house for next to nothing. Of course there were alternative heat options by then, but they all came at a price. We wanted to save money, so that's what we did. Plus, both of us grew up with it. This is the same country comfort stove that was here when we moved in. There's some more. I found it doesn't smoke as much if you... Ouch! If you leave one door closed, it doesn't smoke into the house. It sort of heated the entire house, and we used the electric baseboards for backup when it got really cold. The blowers are going on the stove, so it pumps hot air out of the front of those ports. And this thing is warm. Wouldn't you say?
Yes.
You just gonna hang out here all day? And today, we use this wood burner as backup to our outdoor wood boiler because during these nasty polar vortex blasts, the boiler can sometimes struggle to keep up with it all. So we build a fire in the house, and that can help make it feel really cozy.
Oh, it's like there's a snow chunk right there. Oh my goodness gracious. Have you felt the window? You know how cold it is in here? Look,
It's
I
like
don't even
40.
have goosebumps.
It's ice. But when it gets down to minus 20 and below wind chills, because of some 30-mile-per-hour winds, all bets are off. I have to keep a very close eye on more than just the house when it is this cold. All right, well, I'm inside of our block building that's right next to our house. We call it the block house. And I'm not really sure what this building was originally for. We think it was probably a summer kitchen or somewhere where they did something all season long because this building is insulated with corn cobs. It's got really thick walls that are filled up full of corn cobs, and it insulates really well as a result. This building contains probably one of the most interesting wood burners that I've ever seen. And when it gets super cold like it is right now, we usually fire up the wood stove in here because, believe it or not, our well is also in this building. The well is only about 20 to 25 feet deep, and it's right here in the corner of the building. And our pressure tank and our well pump is all out here. Plus there's a sink with a faucet. So we've got to keep this warm. All we heat it with now is one of those oil-filled radiant heaters, and it seems to do the trick just fine. Matter of fact, when I checked on it this morning, it was still about 50 degrees in here with just that oil-filled heater, and it's dropped to 40 in here. I don't want it to really get any colder, so I'm just going to warm it up once with a wood stove, and essentially I'll have 3 fires going at once. And this happens once or twice a year. So I want to show you this stove. Coles brand. It's easy to look at the amount of work that's involved with all of this and think it's just not worth it. And the older I get, the more I can relate to that argument. But I don't think I'd be the same person I am today if I hadn't grown up doing this. Heating with firewood builds character, no doubt about it. There's a sense of accomplishment that comes with providing your own means for producing heat. This one does have fire brick line in the inside of it. And this little doober can get hot. It works really well. Oh yeah, she's going pretty good now. But this is how it got started for me, or how it got in my blood. So, well, as long as I can possibly remember, I've been cutting wood. So
Now, you boys weren't hardly big enough to carry the pieces of wood through the floor and over to the wood box, but I guess it was a good training for you.
It was good training. Well, at least I think so. All right, well, thanks for showing me, Dad.
Yeah.
I believe having a little bit of struggle in life is a good thing. I think you tend to take less for granted. Sometimes you can't just flip a switch or write a check. You got to earn it. The hard work principles you take away from chopping wood will serve you well in any work you wish to pursue all throughout life. Okay, I'm just going to have a little fireside chat. This is actually the newest wood burner I'm going to show you today, but it's going to bring us full circle because this is modeled after an old 17 or 1800s style home. This is my in-laws' house that they built about 4 years ago. It's built after a traditional Cape Cod style home, and they decided to go with what would have traditionally been in one of these houses, a centralized wood burning fireplace. It's got an enormous chimney that goes up through both stories, and back then they probably would have had a fireplace upstairs as well to heat the bedrooms. But the colonists would have used it to obviously stay warm. They probably gathered around the fireplace to sleep on the coldest nights, but they use it for cooking too. We've got some vegetable soup on right now, and the girls like to... What else do you like to do on the...
We like to roast marshmallows.
Roast marshmallows?
Yeah.
Sleep. You guys spent the night and slept right here on the floor, didn't you?
Yeah,
I slept right
It was.
here, like my head was right
I've fallen asleep by the fire before on like a stool or something.
And that's one of the things you can't get from a propane furnace that's in your basement. It's the ambiance and the cozy feel and just the atmosphere that you get from something like this. This fireplace is the greatest place to come into after you've been working outside in the cold, or if you just want to snuggle up and fall asleep.
Yeah.
And everybody just gravitates towards it. Now right now, my father-in-law has the screen off the front, but he's got a screen that he puts in front to keep hot embers from coming out onto the floor. This is a modernized version of this fireplace too, because it's got propane rod that goes into the back that he can use to start the fire. And he could switch it over to a gas log if he ever wanted to. And it's also got air ducts. Did they do the air ducts back in the old days too? Did they have it all plumbed in for air or not?
I don't think so.
Don't think so?
I don't think so.
But this one actually has air ducts that come in to draw air from the outside, which helps it to keep the smoke and stuff from billowing into the house. So it's got to have good draft. This is what they did when they first settled in America. You know, we didn't get coal. Well, we had coal back then, but there was wood everywhere. And if you lived somewhere near woods, then you had an unlimited supply of heat. And there wasn't a gas line out front to hook up to. But okay, I think the best way to round out this video is to cook a few marshmallows on the fire. That seems fitting on what's going to be the coldest Christmas in 40 years.
perfectly toasted.
Perfectly
In
toasted?
my opinion, I like them like that.
Well, I hope I cleared up why we burn wood and why we started burning wood and why lots of people around here burn wood. So you ready to eat your marshmallows?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think it's about time to open some presents too. We hope that you have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And as always, I want to thank you so much for clicking on this video. I hope that you liked it. And if we're lucky, we'll see you next year. Thanks for watching. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Ouch!